Explore the depths of your curiosity with aerospace engineer John Connelly, Columbia Space Center's Benjamin Dickow, and CEO of Heavy Metal Magazine Matthew Medney, as they bring scientists, engineers, and authors on a journey of discovery. This is Putting the Science in Science Fiction, where fiction and science collide.
What's up, WonderCon? This is Putting the Science in Science Fiction. I'm Matt Medney. We have Benjamin Dickow and John Connelly here. Ben from the Columbia Space Center and John from Lockheed Martin. And we are here to ramble about the worst science representation in fiction and really cool space vehicles. And before we hit record, we were about to get into a really heated conversation about the poster of For All Mankind. And while we are going to dive into that, may I please first mention that we are all Ron Moore fans who absolutely love Battlestar Galactica. With that said, Go. What is wrong with the poster?
M16's on the moon. That's my biggest beef with it.
So
talk about...
How much do you want me to spoil season 1?
Oh, you can spoil the whole thing. Weirdly, too, I know the technical guy. I know the astronaut who's the technical advisor on that. So, he's a great guy, and I don't want to say anything, I don't want to say anything to get him in trouble, but, man, come on.
Okay,
I was going to call him up and be like, what's up with the poster, man?
No, so I think you're actually going to change your mind on this one. So
you can't spoil it. You can't spoil the end of the story. I haven't seen the last 2 episodes of season 1.
I won't spoil past the first 5 episodes because that's all he needs for context. Right now.
Okay.
So for anyone,
that's cool.
For anyone watching WonderCon right now and you want to watch the show, please mute me for at least a minute. Okay. So the show starts off with it's. Have you seen Man in the High Castle?
Yeah, and I know that it's an alternate history
Right.
if we were able to keep going and all. Yeah.
No. But it's actually a little bit more nuanced than that. It's actually that we didn't win the space race. The Soviets landed on Mars first, and we were second. And then, the Cold War effectively starts happening on the moon. And I'm not going to say anything more than that because it will affect John's last 2 episodes. But that's effectively understood from the first 5, is that the Cold War is shifting from Earth to the moon. And that's kind of where you're getting it all.
Okay.
Does that change your mind?
Okay. It puts context of those M16s on the moon, but still, the physics of that seem a little wacky to me.
I was about to say that. Oh.
Like they've got a lot of kick, and it seems like they would just be the astronauts would be projectiles just as much as anything else. So I don't know how they solve for that, but it just it looked a little cheeseball, and I was like, hey, wouldn't you have some other sort of weapon on the moon that would not be kicking you across kilometers of moon space?
So I haven't seen them use them yet because that's actually season 2 where they use them. So I've only seen the trailers and the posters with them holding them, as you say. For all we know, they could press the trigger and they could go flying the other way. I haven't seen it yet to know if that's what happens. But understand also that it is 1970s technology trying to figure out what to do. It is not pretty, their space race. It's not this utopian, they make it there and everybody's happy. People die. But the coolest part about the show is, unlike in reality, which I am a firm hater of, I do not think that public opinion should dictate whether or not astronauts' death should stop a program. You are effectively saying that there are humans who have signed up and understand the risks of dying, and then they die on a mission, and then people who did not sign up for a mission who do not want to risk their lives are saying, well, we're really sad they died. And then people being like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't do it anymore. Well, those people didn't sign up purposefully because they didn't want to die. These other people wanted to push humanity forward, and they took the risk. And I think that is the biggest thing that we fail at with NASA and honestly all space programs, that we get too scared of people dying, and it is horrible, and they shouldn't die. But you need to push humanity forward, and that is the lens of the show, is that they do not stop because of accidents.
That makes sense.
And I love it.
Although,
sorry,
that's good. Well,
I've binged the entire first season over the last 72 hours, so I am hyper excited about this show.
All right, well, you've convinced me. I'll definitely take a look at it. I'll definitely watch it. And like I said, I know that the astronaut who's the technical director or the technical advisor on it, and so I've been meaning to do it anyway because he's a nice guy, and I should support him.
To his credit, I have been watching it with Alexis, my fiance, and every time something happens from an astronaut capsule spacecraft point of view, she always looks at me and says, "Is that possible?" And the science and the aeronauticals of it are pretty on point. I mean, John probably can speak to it more than I can, but I mean, it felt really realistic.
No,
that's cool.
I agree. There's never a point in the show where I felt like they were breaking the laws of physics. Also, and I feel like they were really acknowledging the limits of, how much fuel would they have? Are they capable of doing these missions? Did they have to wait for certain spacecraft, the strategies that they had to plan?
No, it was just really well done. And I didn't even know until, I don't know, maybe episode 7 that it was Ron Moore. I just missed that somehow. Like, I was over at John's. I'm in Denver, as you know, and I was at John's over the weekend before we went up to Winter Park. And on Friday night, we were like, let's just try this show. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then literally binged it from Friday night till yesterday, finished the whole series, finished the whole season. So I feel like I'm in it.
And the new season, the new season comes out next week or tomorrow or something?
Just came out.
So I think they're actually, I think they're actually doing weekly drops. So I think the first 2 episodes on season 2 are already live, and they're just adding one every week. And then, something else that's really interesting about it is, and I'm not spoiling anything because this is on the internet, but season 2 is a decade later. And even within...
okay.
Yeah, it's all in the internet, so I'm not saying anything. And then from what I'm hearing, season 3 will be 50 years in the future.
Wow.
It's the Expanse prequel.
Effectively, right? It is kind of the Expanse prequel, and that's actually a great segue to talk about some vehicles, because the Rosinante is one of my favorite space vehicles in all of fiction. John, I know you've probably waited your entire life to geek out on the Rosinante, so I will give you the floor right now.
I've got to say that it's probably the most iconic. I mean, there's spacecraft that are very iconic ones. Obviously, the Millennium Falcon, Serenity, the Rosinante. I mean,
Enterprise.
The Enterprise. I guess I think of them in different scales. Like there's the big ships that are, the ones that carry entire massive crews. But this is like, that small class like Serenity with a small group of people. And I mean, I think that's also when the Expanse has been at its strongest, is when it's revolved around this story of this crew of a different group of people, from Earth, Mars, and the Belt. But the ship itself, I mean, it's badass. Dude, if anyone saw the end of the Expanse last season, I won't give any further details, but I mean, it's effectively a giant nuclear reactor, a fusion drive in inertial confinement fusion drive, which is actually why
What's
it doesn't
that mean?
need to be. It means it's where they have a pellet of deuterium and tritium that they will send out and then have a whole grouping of lasers hit it, and they will compress the ball of tritium and deuterium simultaneously, and that it can achieve fusion outside of needing the continuous temperature and pressure, not pressure, sorry, the temperatures required to reach the fusion barrier.
So John, just from a non-scientist hearing that sounds bonkers. So
much smaller engine needed.
Yeah.
Can you scale that for me to like meltdowns, nuclear meltdowns, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island?
No. Here, I'll use an example here. Okay, we've seen this before. One example, Spider-Man 2. I mean, that's that was Hollywoodized, but in the sense of having do you remember the device that Doc Ock was building, of where it had a ball?
The pre-Marvel Studios. We don't talk about those movies.
I know, except for just you. Yes, but you've all seen that. And actually, that was a good movie.
It's not too bad.
Yeah,
Jamie Foxx.
No.
That's not a good one.
No, I'm talking.
I think that was the.
You're talking about
that was
Raimi
the
one.
Andrew Garfield stuff.
Yeah,
this is Sam Raimi. This is the second one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've also seen there's been fusion experiments that have been happening over the past decades of big laser arrays that are fused, and sometimes what they'll do is it'll be a tiny piece of, it's like a type of deuterium foam, and it's hanging by a spider thread in the middle of this array, and there's all these lasers that are there. And so the idea is that you do it as a pulse. So you're sending out, I think it's like 40, 60, or 200 hertz, which is the rate of these pellets that are being sent out, and they're being hit by this laser array, and effectively the Rocinante is riding the shockwave that is happening off the back of this. They're getting the force of the magnet. So there's a whole bunch of magnets that are around the laser array. So when there's that burst of fusion energy, and they're also mixing propellant in there as well, it's being contained by these magnets, and the recoil that's happening through the magnetic cusps is pushing off against the Rocinante, and then all of its propellant is going out the back. So, but if you look at the Rocinante from the inside, it's, as most ships in the Expanse, stacked vertically, because it is a ship that's used to travel at 1g acceleration. And so the humans are, it's almost like a tower, and humans be walking around normally as long as they would be under acceleration, and then they would flip around and decelerate. I know that the Rocinante has a tremendous bank of weapons, from its railgun to the PDCs.
Not M16s.
No.
I want to get back to that M16 for a second, but not right now. Keep going, John.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
I mean, the ship is, the things that are where we reach fiction is, in order to achieve a 1g acceleration for any duration of time, you're changing your delta V significantly. And in order to change your delta V by that much, you have to expend a lot of mass.
And just real quick, for our watchers' sake, just quickly, what is delta V?
Change in velocity.
Cool.
So I'm going to butcher the name of the name of the creator of the rocket equation, but there is an equation of where you have a mass ratio, and a mass ratio of a spacecraft means the ratio of the total spacecraft at the beginning compared to the portion of the spacecraft that's remaining at the end. So, if we use a Saturn V rocket, for example, what's left at the end is the capsule at the very top. So
is it not Wernher von Braun?
What? Let's not get distracted on that for a second.
No, he didn't do that. Yeah, but
okay. My point being is that the vast.
But yes, it is. Yes, you're right.
I think 98% of the mass of a Saturn V is in fuel and all the components of the lower stages.
Yeah, totally.
It requires that much. We have to lose that much mass in order to push the remaining portion out of the gravity well. So in the same idea, the spacecraft, like the Rocinante, doesn't have that much mass that's not the Rocinante. Its fuel ratio, its mass ratio is very low, just a little bit above 1, which can only mean that, if we're going to still work within the rules of physics, that has an incredibly high exhaust velocity, which means that the exhaust, the plasma plume that is coming out of the back is a measurable fraction of the speed of light. Probably at least like 4 or 6%. And
Wow.
so that's kind of that's the thing though, is like that's where the Expanse has, like, not only do we have fusion ships in the Expanse, but the Epstein drive is really almost fantasy. It's a drive that has such incredible efficiency that they don't have to carry that much mass. So that's why the Rocinante can stay this small, agile ship, but still travel incredible distances across the solar system, capable of lifting on and off of a planet without any sort of stages. That requires, incredible exhaust velocity, so that it can change its delta V with relatively little mass expenditure. And that is where I will stop. And we can go. I don't want to go down.
It's funny though. Yep.
I don't want to bore everybody if we're going to go too far down technical route.
I bet Mike, our technical producer, is loving this right now. Just FYI.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose John?
It looks like it.
Oh, well, let's keep going. He'll come back, hopefully.
Keep going. All right. All right, fine. So on that note, actually, two things that he brought up that I think is really interesting. One is that whole idea that you would have this huge ship that would come off the Earth or wherever, travel in space, then the whole ship would kind of come down on another planet, and then the whole thing would go back up. All that. That was, speaking of Werner von Braun, that was the first idea for how we were going to get to the moon in the 50s, and actually in the early 60s. It was the leading way that we were going to do this. Was we were going to build the hugest, like the Saturn V is 36 stories tall. This rocket would have been even bigger, like,
oh really,
hugely bigger. And the idea was the whole thing was going to go up and the whole thing was going to land. It was like a 50s version of a rocket, right? And in around 61, the idea of a staged mission with that interorbital rendezvous of the two spacecrafts coming together, that's what really revolutionized the whole Apollo program. And it was that got us to the moon, I think, as quickly as we did. Because if we had gone with the first idea, the amount of engineering and materials and an expense would have taken us into the 70s at least before we stepped foot on the moon. It was too big of a thing.
That's crazy.
So yeah. So that whole, what John was saying is like super important, but it's interesting that in the Expanse they've kind of gone back to that, but they have a completely different drive, right? So the Apollo program is all drive. Chemical propellants.
The thing with the Apollo program, just talking some real science for a second, that I feel in a sense is underplayed, because like there's so much value in the liftoff and then the landing. The fact that we had two isolated bodies of mass that connected with each other in the vacuum of space is bonkers to me. And that's the
totally
part,
nuts,
right?
Totally nuts.
Like, I feel like people don't understand that part where like the lift off from the moon and then back into the capsule is like really crazy that works.
Exactly. And the think about it too is I think they only had maybe like 4 practice missions or so before they were like, all right, let's do this thing. And it's all mechanical, right? It's all like, sure, there's this sort of rudimentary computer that's trying to like match up velocities and stuff, but mostly it was all piloted, and the actual connection point was like a ratchet system with these little clips, and that was it. Like you had these little, I think there were 12 little clips on the side, plus this little ratchet that kind of brought them together and fused them.
How?
And then that was it. It's totally crazy.
What are we talking about? What I meant.
John,
we're talking about...
No, Ben, go.
Oh, sorry. You were just talking about the ship from the Expanse and how it was this one thing that kind of comes on and off of planets. And I was saying that was the first sort of idea for how we were going to get to the moon, was build this big, huge rocket. The whole thing was going to go up. The whole thing was going to land on the moon. The whole thing would come back. And that it was this idea of staging and getting rid of stuff, and then the orbital docking that really kind of got us to the moon as quickly as we did.
And,
But
and,
you know,
and I
obviously
was
we didn't
saying
have
that
fusion reactors.
and I was saying that everyone like fantasizes over the launching of the Saturn V and the landing of the module, but like people don't, I don't think, put enough understanding in how fast it is that we connected two different bodies of engineering in the vacuum of space. Like that to me is the part
Yep.
that's wild. That like nobody like really
Right.
like I feel like the general public doesn't understand that like when Neil and Buzz went off the moon and then connected back with Michael, that was way crazier than any of the other things they did. Like how?
There is
Exactly.
a tiny triangular window. Well, take it back. No. Take it back. There's two triangular windows on the command module. No, not the command module. On the lunar module, and then there's a tiny rectangular window, which is the sight guide that you have for looking at that little tiny target on the command module. And so it's like you're there looking up through this little tiny thing, and you're just trying to guide it in as slow as possible and not miss. And not like hit it on edge. Because if they hit it too hard, it could bounce away, or they could break. Yeah.
And that's the thing. The lunar module, the skin of the lunar module is like super thin. It's like foil.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
That's what.
Anyway,
the last thing I'll say on it, because this is still my favorite. It's probably my favorite moment of science because it pairs science with like the goal of humanity, and to me, that's like the beauty is when Neil was landing it, and he just goes on the radio and goes, landing site isn't good, taking manual control, and then he lands it, and you just hear mission control going, Buzz Aldrin's heart rate 153, Neil Armstrong 86, and you're just like this dude.
Yeah, with the computer running right going off the second time, it's like second light. We could abort, and he's just like, no. We're going in. I mean, when you're that close.
I mean, dude, my heart was like at 200 just watching the Apollo 11 documentary on CNN that came out 2 years ago. The one, John, when we were together when we watched it.
Oh, dude, that
hotel room. Remember
when they pulled all the footage? When they found all the footage from 1969, awesome. And they
my hands were sweating.
And you know
watching that
too. So you're just like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Also, like that.
It's amazing.
What's the name? I'm blanking on his name. Honnold. What's his first name? The free timer.
Alex Honnold.
Oh, yeah.
Not science related, but if anyone hasn't watched Free Solo, you must watch Free Solo. I knew he lived, and I was dripping in the theater.
Yeah. Or when you stop for a second, like when he wasn't just going at a continuous pace, which was most of the time, but he just like pause and be like,
right.
And you're like, Jesus Christ. In a complete entire segue, I got to see a spaceship today.
How?
So,
cool.
Yes. Today was the last day they were doing final packaging for Lucy and putting her into a box and shipping her off for solar array integration. And then she will go to the Cape for processing and launch sometime, I believe, in November.
Actually, guys.
Oh, cool.
Wait. We should have started this episode with this. I didn't even realize it. I don't even know if you know this, Ben, but John built the, and please correct me, I don't want to misspeak, John, but John built the testing module for the helicopter that is now on Mars.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yes.
That's cool.
I did. It was
That's awesome.
I mean, you've touched something that's on another celestial body now. That's pretty cool.
Well, I was gonna say they never let you touch it. That's the annoying thing.
Well,
you can be this close. Believe me, I've been there on a lot of spacecraft. I'm just like hand hovering over it, and just like,
guys,
don't do that.
And also, they clean those things down because they don't want any of your germs showing up on Mars.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, depending on, there is I mean, it's not like, I mean, I would have had gloves on. It's not like I was able to put my bare hand
Of course.
next to this guy. And just to know, like, yes, that's a good important thing to note, Ben, that I think a lot of people forget about is there are incredibly stringent strict procedures that NASA has put in place to prevent contamination of other worlds by our spacecraft,
which is a great. I was going to say is a great
prime
lead
directive.
into a really not so great science reference in a fictional movie, which is Gravity, and how bad the science is in that movie, and how Sandra Bullock somehow has hair product in her hair continuously as she's floating through space.
That is never going to. I mean, the elephant in the room is the notion of, yes, agreed. Once you blow up a satellite, its pieces are moving into higher orbits and into lower orbits. I mean, and so yes, if you were in a very different orbit than what that orbit was, you are probably going to intersect it at a very very quick vector, and that could be thousands of kilometers per hour. But they in that movie they really gave the sense that there was this moving cloud of debris that they in the same orbit with, but that was going 17,500 miles per hour relative to them. So the only way I could see through that, Ben, is that they were orbiting in the opposite direction of the cloud.
Oh yeah.
But then that wouldn't have taken 90 minutes. That would have taken 45.
Right.
So
That's right.
Something's got to give.
I mean,
and it would have. Yeah. Go ahead. What?
I was just gonna say, like, you almost think that they did it on purpose for the amazing ramp that they knew Neil deGrasse Tyson was gonna do. Honestly, that movie got more publicity because of Neil's rant than it would have if it was just like an okay science-related movie.
No, well, when we're on that, I'm gonna go into it because I've got notes on this one.
Wait, Ben, what were you gonna say first? Before
I was gonna we'll go right to it, John. But I was gonna say, the funny thing about that is, I've been struck by the fact that in the past 10 years or so, these movies are using science as a way to market themselves, and it's like this is like the real thing. And it started with Gravity, right? Like the way it's shot and all that stuff. It gives you the sense that must be what it's really like. And so they're banking on that, but at the same time, as soon as anybody comes up and says, "Hey, that's not right," they're like, "Oh, but this is fiction. It's not supposed to be real. It's totally fine." Like, what's the deal? Which one are you gonna have?
Yeah,
and now
Ad Astra.
Yeah, exactly.
So for starters, the director of Ad Astra came to give an interview at Lockheed while sitting in one of the test habitats for Halo that I had helped build, and talking about how Ad Astra was going to be so adherent to science. And Lockheed actually gets a visual drop in there. They get a call out because the people at the very beginning in the top of the tower are wearing these Lockheed Martin jackets when Brad Pitt is walking out into the sunlight. And during that time, they're saying like this is going to be so scientifically accurate. So for starters, okay, they are traveling between Earth and Mars. They're traveling between the Moon and Mars. They decide to stop at a random space station. That would take weeks out of your journey, if not potentially just make it physically impossible. The idea that you're going to, very rarely do spacecraft have large margins of fuel with them. I highly doubt that one did either. That once you are going from A to B, rarely would you deviate unless it was something super critical, and that was not critical enough to merit it. 2, taking your seatbelt off while in a launching vehicle that's about to be that's about to be segmenting. That is insane. 3, shooting a gun inside of a spacecraft, also insane. 4, riding the wave of an antimatter explosion. What is your ship pushing against? An expanding, gas cloud and shrapnel that's about to just hit you at a fraction of the speed of light and kill you? Hey. And also, just what was that spacecraft's capability? Like, it's capable of reaching Neptune in 77 days, but they haven't ventured into the outer solar system in 15 years. Like,
yeah, right.
And that the energy coming from the antimatter was getting stronger over distance, which is a direct contradiction of.
And they didn't.
Right.
Electromagnetic intensity decreases with the square of distance.
And John, they didn't have any bases on Europa or Ganymede or anything, right? Right, no, they didn't have any of those, but they could get to Neptune in 77 days.
Yeah, and they had what was clearly, decades, if not like centuries of colonization on Mars already, and it was like, we still. There was just such a strange mismatch. The most accurate part was when they were on the moon and they were driving around and being assaulted by those pirates, or those people trying to capture them.
Right.
And
but how were there pirates on the moon? Can we just talk about that for a second? That part to me was so unreal. Like, pirates on the moon?
Well,
what are we talking about?
Let me posit it to you this way. If you do, if you're on the moon and you're a bunch of different nations having different regions on the moon, and there's a lot of blank areas in between, and you don't have much in the line of a policing force, it's not exactly easy to just, like, go out and stop people. I mean, that's kind of what they do, though. I mean, once they shoot him with a missile.
But how would they have like?
Because they're being protected. Because they were being protected by certain nations. That was it. That was like 2-second line.
That's right.
That they were being harbored.
Correct. I do remember that. At least Ad Astra didn't have iPhones working in orbit like Away did. Did you see Away?
No, I saw. You told me before I watched it.
Hillary Swank called her son on an iPhone from space.
Pretty sure you'd be moving from tower to tower too quickly.
Yeah. It's the roaming.
I was gonna say
roaming charge.
Maybe a sat phone.
No, she was FaceTiming.
I mean, Steve Jobs is doing good work from the grave, I guess. I don't know.
Speaking of crazy billionaires, though, in this whole thing, when you're talking about law on the moon, Elon for the past couple of weeks have been talking about, like, well, when we go to Mars, we're not going to have any laws. We're doing our own thing.
So,
I mean, technically, according to Mark Watney, Mars and the moon are under maritime law, right?
That would make sense.
Well,
but Elon's not going to do it because Elon does his own thing.
Well, what's interesting is that we
what
have
do you
the
think, though? Hold on, Ben. Wait, but
yeah,
Ben, what do you think? Like external from anything else, from if you had $1 gazillion like Elon does, and you built an entire fleet of spaceships, and you're the only person on Mars. I mean, I think it's one of those things. It's like, if you get there, no one else is even remotely close to getting there. It's kind of your gig, right?
Okay, but then don't wrap yourself up into, hey, we're inspiring humanity and we're going to keep, pushing forward, because then you're really just doing it for your own ego and for your own thing at the end. So, I don't know. If you're going to do this for all person kind, then structure yourself for all person kind.
But I think Elon sometimes has a poor way of communicating what he means. My assumption, without seeing the interview that you're speaking of, which my assumption would be that what he means is the laws on Earth are broken and make no sense, and they shouldn't adhere to them on Mars, and maybe we need new and different laws.
Well,
I'm sure somewhere he's saying that, yes.
Well, for a time when Mars is still small and a small colony, it'll be able to, in theory, operate under like a much smaller idealistic republic or some kind of government that they can create for themselves. It'll eventually become too large, and then it'll be subject to corruption and entropy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if there's no resources or goods to really mine, and everything's being brought in, then you're effectively kind of like a communistic version of the Giver, because everybody's working together at an equal level to get things done.
Yeah.
You're not really right. The Giver is effectively a communistic story, And that's effectively what you would be, is you'd all be equals trying to make sure you don't all die.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because it would be. I
And
mean, it's going to be if someone's trying to operate too much as an autocrat and they piss too many people off and there's no one to stop those pissed off people and then it's just like viva la revolucion. I mean, that's that, and I think we've seen different. I'm going to struggle to come to mind, and you're going to have to help me with some examples, but I know there are some. Sunshine is kind of one. I think of like a small group of people in space who, like, some are kind of losing it, but the idea of like the threat of one human being in a closed environment, and I don't want them to like make a movie and then have the public get dissuaded by the notion of it, but I think that is a real possibility. If you had 10 people or 20 people on a colony in Mars and someone turned off the surveillance system as someone started knocking people off one at a time, but it's not, you can't blame it on an alien like the Thing, just that. But there's no help. It's like you got to figure out yourself.
You're right.
It's just
right.
It's going to be a challenge.
I mean, that's
it's going
why
to be something that's going to
have to be. You have to be vetted, and even then, your vetting is almost like meaningless, right? Because like no one knows what's going to happen to the psyche,
exactly.
right? Like obviously the baseline, you have to be a good person, you can't be a criminal, and you have to be like relatively intelligent because you have to survive on another planet. But once you're there, all of the other tests kind of go out the window, because the second that you have that moment, and you'll have the moment where you're like, oh, I'm very far from home.
Yeah.
Like, it'll crack some people, and you won't know how to handle that until you handle it. There's no like vetting for that, right? Because even if you're on Earth in a training simulation, home's only a few thousand miles away, tops.
Or
if you have
like out the door, like the idea of being able to walk out a door, like reset yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but when you're on Mars, you are far away from home.
We'll
that's for sure. You're in it for the long haul.
We'll have to see how we'll put on the moon and see how people hold up, because at least you can bring them back relatively quickly.
Pretty quickly.
If we see a definitive trend of people just like not being able to hack it, then we might have to rethink space travel.
I mean, John, we've all seen Moon with Sam Rockwell.
Right?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's good.
But he's also by himself. So, I mean, that's like, I think that's a terrible idea.
Sure.
Right, but maybe you're going to be by yourself for a certain period of time, right? Who knows?
Well, I mean, but remember when Elon had the call out? I don't know if it was Elon necessarily, but there was that you could sign up for the people interested in going to Mars. And you saw a lot of the interviews, and there was just like some really introverted people. I'll leave it at that. And, they're like the type of people where I feel like if you had more than one of them together on any spot, they would just all die. But maybe you're right. Maybe they're perfect for like the one man, one woman, one person operation.
Who knows?
I tend to think that an overly introverted person would probably fail. I think someone that enjoys being introverted but can be very extroverted is like the perfect person for that, because you need someone that can be okay being alone for 2 weeks doing a science project that has to be like done in a certain way, but also like won't stab somebody on Mars because they don't like what they said and they don't know how else to handle it. And that is
I mean, no psychopaths. But the same thing though, like look at even just use Corona as an example. Over the past year, we have seen a dramatic and scary increase in the amount of domestic violence that has happened,
and suicides. Right, from being isolated. That's a good telltale of what might happen on Mars.
And this isolation is a fraction of the type of isolation that we would be seeing.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's pushed even the people who really thought themselves as being hardcore introverted began to realize at some point that they did need other human interaction. And also like you're not if you don't have more than one person and you're farther away than really like the distance of the moon to Earth, you're never going to have any live communication.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like
Right.
how enjoyable is communicating solely through video messages, which is what will be happening as we go
Well,
out into the cosmos.
So that's actually a great
Sure.
transition point, John. Why don't you give our viewers an insight, and Ben, you too, on how realistic something like sublight communication in Star Trek is? Is there any realistic subspace? Is there
Yeah.
any realistic way to have more instantaneous communication, quantum entangled perhaps? But let's kind of dive into that for a second. How would you communicate not just from Earth to Mars or Earth to Ganymede, but what if we went Earth to Proxima Centauri? Like, is there any way to actually do that with our current understanding of physics? Ben?
I don't think so. But I was going to take the cheap way out and say, if we're talking about subspace, right? If we can get out there, then we've figured out some way to get things to go faster than light, or at least get around that in somehow. So I'm wondering if there might be some sort of communication technique that we've got that follows us around with that. But yeah, as of right now, no. Like, I mean, yeah. If it takes 7 minutes or 11 minutes or whatever it is to get a signal back and forth to Mars, I would think that we would have figured out, or at least be working on, a more instantaneous way to get information back and forth. And if we haven't hit it yet, we probably are where we're supposed to be.
And quantum entangled, is there anything with that?
So no, with our current understanding of quantum entanglement, the act of observing the whatever information a subatomic particle or a quantum entangled particle would contain would be destroyed. So you can quantum entangle particles, and they can be exhibiting the same states, spin, the different factors that are going into play. But as soon, and you can encode one, but as soon as you try to read it, you'll destroy the data, and you can't read at the other end. So it might exist. Maybe it's a further understanding of, let's say chroma quantum mechanics. The idea of like color charge and red, blue, green. We're not going to get down there. As of right now, not even quantum entanglement gives us the ability to actually move information faster than the speed of light, or like the ability to transfer information is there, but we have no way to read it. The only other way I could think is,
so there's no effect.
No, I mean, not within our understanding of physics. I mean, if you went into, Star Trek physics, maybe a warp bubble, maybe in hyperspace, maybe wormholes, maybe quantum entanglement that does allow you to transfer information instantaneously. But nope, that's.
Do you think it's
speed limit? Speed of light.
So just to dig into that a little bit more, because something we've talked about this on other episodes, right? My general thought is we've gone from prop propeller plane to robots on Mars in, call it generously, 150 years. It's probably closer to like 110, but let's just say it's one. Yeah. Well, because it was like 1897 or something that the Wright brothers did the plane, right? Wasn't it like
1903?
Oh, it was 1903. Okay, so it's 117 years, right? Whatever it is, to today. My assumption is in like 1,000 years or 10,000 years or 1,000,000 years, as long as we don't get hindered by a great filter, we should be able to figure out more, right? Or no, or like. Just for WonderCon.
This is the part.
Humor me.
I need to listen. This is the thing. This is the part of the podcast that I love the most. When we start like transversing, it's not science and science fiction. We start getting into like more philosophy and sort of approaches to life on these things, and it's the best. So I think for this, I would love to think that that progress is this sort of, upward, generally upward kind of, slope. But, if we could just decide like, hey, we're good. This is as much as we have to do right now. We can't, this is super cynical, but yeah, there's no profit in it or something like that. And we just kind of like put the brakes on progress. That's, I mean, there are people out there who really think that progress is a dirty word. And to me, that means that they don't want that sort of like upward, or at least just a regular trajectory.
But would you, Ben, would you argue that might be a great filter? Is our inability to band together, right? Because like we always talk about great filters as existential threats, right? Whether it's an asteroid or the sun, right? We have a time. We know unequivocally with our current understanding of physics and our sun that there is an expiration date on Earth, right? It's like a billion or billion plus years. But 5 billion years.
Well,
right?
It's all less than that till the Earth cooks. Like a billion. We'll go with that.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
Right. But at some point in a measurable time scale, which is relatively small compared to the entirety of the universe, the Earth will be gone. Period. Right? So with that, we have an expiration date. And I hope that, and to your point, progress gets hindered, but progress, I think, is not what drives us to these things. I'm more of a hopeful believer that it's curiosity, and curiosity is not tarnished or tainted by profit or by business. There will always be an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos in our current. If capitalism doesn't fall and it stays, there'll always be eccentric billionaires who are just curious if they can do it, right? And that'll be our progress.
Well, Matt, go ahead.
Wait, Ben.
I was just gonna say, 50 years ago, it wasn't these eccentric billionaires. It was the nations that decided to funnel their resources and all that stuff to do these kind of things. And I think that's, the billionaire thing, whatever it is, that was something that was big at the end of the 1800s and sort of early 20th century. Then it kind of went out of favor, and we were more collective in our efforts. And now it's back to sort of being more individual. But yeah, I agree. I also think though that progress is, and when we're thinking far out, it's not just curiosity, which I think is really important. But I think it's also like this idea of like, of improvement, of wanting to give something better to what you had before, or something better to, for who's coming next, and that kind of thing. And I think it's a super powerful motivator to want to just see everything better. And I think, if we start losing that, or if we get complacent about that, or not caring about what's going to happen, to other generations and stuff, that could get kind of dangerous and won't be very progressive.
I could not agree with that more.
Let me, just before we move on there, and I said this to you, Matt, earlier today, the universe created life so it could break its own rules.
Very true.
I mean, it's
very
just
true.
At some level,
is that your epitaph?
Maybe. I don't know.
That is.
But the idea of like what goes up must come down until you build a rocket, in which case now you're able to escape the planet. And I mean, the things that we do now are still they're all within our understanding of the laws of physics, right? But I'm sure at some point where we set the bar and the limit of the laws of physics, we're going to push back as we figure out more. But we will begin to be able to do things that would not occur, that maybe don't occur naturally except for inside stars, except for inside neutron stars, but maybe never. Maybe now, at some point we'll have super colliders or, create stable wormholes and just, we spawned out of inanimate bunches of particles into sentient beings over the course of, a billion-year journey of life. And to think that, might as well have fun with the universe around it. I'm not saying trash the planet. I'm just saying that in the notion of progress, I think that we need to flex the fact that we exist. And while we exist, explore to see what more we become. Or maybe the fact is, like, maybe there's a grand universe that doesn't exist yet, of where we find out that we can turn the speed of light off or change things, like, God things that can bring galaxies back together and reverse dark energy, and just like maybe we're a conscious solution that the universe can't do itself, but we can do it for it. And this is, this is
we
like
transcend nature.
Yeah, this is like day one. This is the human race up to now, and just think of like if that was day one, and like you went a year. That's all. That's just the beginning. I mean, to go to the point of being manipulators to save the universe. I don't know. It's pretty ambitious and pretty arrogant, but.
No, and John, I mean, I've told you this. My kind of saying that I always like to use is that all science started as fiction, right? Every idea was not science. It had to go through. Right, and Ben, to your point about progress and curiosity, the one thing that knock on wood, never leaves is the idea of creativity, and people like Alan Moore and Ron Moore, and creating these things. I mean, there's a podcast called The Elephant's Cage, I think. I might be messing that up, and I'll put it in the description. But it is, and there's an episode where Alan Moore sits down with 4 theoretical physicists, and he runs circles around them. It is the wildest thing to see. Like, literally, the creator of Watchmen is sitting down and coming up with these like theoretical hypotheses about how something could work at the quantum state, and you just see these quantum physicists going like, yeah, that could work. And it's like they've never thought about it before, and that's kind of the fusion that we're talking about here, right? That's kind of the whole impetus for this podcast is using the creative medium to bring science to the forefront.
Well,
absolutely, man. And I was just going to say that I think we have a sort of aerospace bent to us. I think because of what I bring to the table, what John brings to the table. And that is direct. What we did to get to the moon or shuttle or whatever, all that stuff was inspired by science fiction and in the fiction of the time to get to that point. And same thing with a lot of biology. I think what's interesting about some of the notions now are things like these ideas of we look at a problem and we say, well, there has to be a solution to this, and then it's the creativity of finding that solution, but there's never like there's this problem. Oh, well, we can never fix it kind of a thing. It's this idea that there's got to be an answer. We fixed all this other stuff. We just have to kind of work on it. I think that's fascinating. It's not just totally based in fiction.
I couldn't agree more. And just real quick, Mike texted me. It's the Infinite Monkey Cage. That's the name of the podcast that this happened on. It's fantastic.
Nice.
Just for the two of you, I'll find the episode and I'll send it to you guys. But anyone listening or watching, you got to watch it. It is inspiring to see someone with zero training in physics just run laps around these guys. And like they like there was even a point in it where like one of them tried to push back, like kind of like exert his hubris of scientific prowess, and then Alan's response like pushed him back down, and you're just like, was this scripted? Because it's like just so good. It's so good.
I'm sure that Alan Moore has plenty of physics knowledge. I mean, if you read Watchmen and you read from the point of view of Dr. Manhattan and just like how his character exists in that quantum state, there's a lot of info. I think that was 35 years ago. I mean,
87.
Alan, those physicists were ready. Alan Moore came prepared.
John, that's 2 for you today.
Damn it!
I know, man.
The viewers won't know what we're talking about because Mike will very elegantly remove it, but that's 2 today.
Hey, speaking of the viewers, I feel like it's my duty to find out, like, how do you guys do some of this in your works of fiction?
Oh, wow.
How do you like handle communication and all that kind of stuff? Start plugging yourself. Come on.
So in Beyond Kuiper.
Before
we get to community.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in Beyond Kuiper, I'll let John talk about the communication array, but we created a units of measure that was effectively powers of 10, which is like how it should be done. And John, I should not say John figured out a way to correlate that and create effectively a table that transferred it into the metric system, because whatever we use here in America is irrelevant. And and it's pretty amazing. And if you we'll add a link to that table, because it's pretty cool what John had put together. But John, why don't you dive into how Bohr and Pius talk across vast distances in Beyond Kuiper?
So in Beyond Kuiper, there are two primary methods of faster than light communication. One is using flow space relays. So that's effectively taking a signal, moving it into flow space, and then still moving it in flow space at less than speed, at the speed of light. So it's not instantaneous, but it's moving significantly faster than the speed of light in our, universe. The other method is that you can have quantum entangled devices, but the caveat is that they have a finite amount of data. And in the notion of that, you can read, but the act of reading once will destroy it. So you can take two devices, you can quantum entangle them. They can be infinite distance apart. Two beings can use them for either audio, video, data transfer, whatever they want, up until that limit is used up, and then they're bricks. And then you would have to bring them back to very specific facilities that are capable of re-quantum entangling devices. But it's kind of interesting because it gives there's a general sense of communication, there's general method, but then there's also this very specific instantaneous communication, but it's not between big groups. It's only between two small paired discrete units.
And to plug one more thing that also I will take credit because my name is on the book, but it really was John that did it, was Screen Rant, which is one of the a great website that reviews a lot of genre movies. Noted that our design for our spaceship, the Nomad, was the most realistic spaceship design ever conceived in fiction. It's a pretty cool tag to get from Screen Rant. And while I take a lot of credit for it, some do and most not. Most of the engineering of it is based on I'm not over exaggerating when I say John had to have read 10,000 hours worth of science journals to come up with that design. And the is it a fusion drive effectively, John?
Yes, it is a magnetized target fusion drive.
Right, and I remember, just to reminisce for a second, I remember the day that you read some paper about a fusion drive concept that's like 50 years out, and you called me freaking out saying that you found our drive and that it was an actual paper that is theoretical of a perceived ability of how to do a fusion drive in 50-ish years. And he was like, this is the framework for our drive. And
that's what started, that's where the first email correspondence is between us for Kuiper. It starts with me and like a whole bunch of math that was just like, okay, distance, acceleration, deceleration, fuel usage, mass ratio, and I was like, we can do it. And I was like, oh, we can write the book now.
That's cool. That's cool. I bring this up because, I think, we have this great podcast where we talk about science, we talk about science fiction, we talk about all kinds of philosophy and stuff like that. But it's important to note that you guys are creators and scientists at the same time, and that it's very authentic. And you're also both wearing caps, and I missed my Amazon delivery of my red cap.
No, your hair is looking good. That's why this hat's on. Because
Thanks, man.
I am the bougiest Jewish male you'll ever meet, and I will only get my hair cut. And I'm gonna plug her. Sage is my hairstylist from New York, and she is the most amazing human ever, and I do not let anyone touch my hair than her, and I fly to New York.
But you live in Los Angeles now.
I do. I do.
He doesn't cut. He never cuts his hair in LA. He will only get it cut when he flies back.
Only.
Oh my God.
well, Ben, to bring it a little bit back down to earth, just a little, not much.
Sure.
Pre-COVID, I don't know if you knew this, I was an adjunct professor at NYU. I taught a creative writing class there. So, I was in New York a lot, where it didn't really matter because I was flying back every other week to teach. So I was like, yeah, this works.
Sure.
This last year was a little bit trying. My hair's gotten very long.
Sure.
My Kramer Jew curls really come out now, and like the stereotype Seinfeld is all there. But no, I'm heading back to New York at the end of March, so I already have my appointment set up.
That's awesome.
But you got to.
But Ben, Matt and I, yes, we are writers, but you are also an educator. You are the president and the director of the Columbia Space Center. I mean, I guess to talk a little bit about that. Just like who do you who do you work with?
The land in which Apollo was built on.
Yeah,
it is holy ground.
I'm sure the perchlorate's still in the soil.
Ooh! When they told me not to drink the water out in the water fountains in Lockheed, and I was like,
no, it's all been mitigated. But it's pretty exciting to be.
Well, maybe they did there. When I went to NASA, I also went to go fill up a water bottle at one of the water fountains, and someone looked at me. They're like, "Are you crazy?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Don't you know what we do here?" And I was like, "Oh, do I literally?" I went from one place to the other place in the continent where they did tons of hydrazine testing.
Nice.
Sorry, I couldn't let that one go. Keep going.
No, that's okay. It's okay.
That's amazing. All right, so not one more thing from Kuiper that I think is important to note based on some of the other points of our conversation today in terms of Ad Astra and their ability to travel to Neptune and the Rocinante. In Kuiper, the Nomad travels from Earth to the edge of the Kuiper Belt by the end of book 2.
Right.
Book 1 has only been released. Spoiler. Sorry, guys. But come on, you knew that was happening.
Yeah.
But on that journey, we really wanted, as Iron Man said so eloquently, it's not about the end, it's about the journey. And we really wanted the journey to stop at Mars, stop at Saturn, stop at Jupiter maybe, stop at a bunch of these different bodies. And John, being the psycho scientist that he is, literally plotted the year in which the planets would be aligned that was far enough away from today that the science that he wanted to put into the story could be relevant enough, but not too far that
awesome.
It was dystopian. And in the year 2092, where the book takes place, is very intentional because John actually used a star thingamajig and plotted the exact year and month in which the Nomad would need to take off based on the speed in which the engine that he created allowed for that would allow us to hit all of those planets and not let Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye yell at us, which was amazing.
Man, I remember because it was
that's awesome.
I did the initial calculations a long time ago, and then when I circled back and was like, ooh, we're not doing flybys like Voyager. Like, we're going to stop.
Right.
And I was like, oh, God, we're going to need so much more fuel. We're going to need so much more propellant. And I was like, I remember Brody panicking. I was like, UT's going to need to make the Nomad look bigger. And he was like, why? I was like, because we're going to need way more fuel. No one's going to buy this if I don't get the mass ratio up. And you're like, really? Is this necessary? And I'm like, yes, it is.
This is great.
And we could go on about this for hours and hours, most likely. And we will probably keep this going on the next episode. So everyone should tune in to Putting the Science in Science Fiction, available all places podcasts are. Mike is giving me the signal that we've exceeded 1 hour graciously.
Oh boy.
And we should start wrapping up. And I will. Any final words, Ben and John?
No, just I'm super happy to be here, and I think there's no better motivator to get into science and be progress than fiction.
I would
Than
John?
progress, I guess I was going to say.
No,
I would
good.
agree there. I would also, just because that's something I've been researching very recently. If you're interested in support, NASA did not receive as much budget as it was expecting, which is probably going to push the moon landing out further than 2024. If you're interested in supporting space, possibly consider looking into different space advocacy and lobbying groups. I just found the Planetary Society.
Plug it.
And
Planetary
Matt
Society.
told me that
Bill
Bill Nye
Nye
is the president, and I'm gonna
Yes.
look
Yeah.
in deeper. But I don't know. I think it's maybe an opportunity to donate and hopefully
Yeah.
that'll lead to help. Like that's the most direct route of being able to help NASA that I could do. So it's an
That's
idea.
awesome.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're into science education, you should also donate to the Columbia Space Center.
Yes.
Absolutely. The Space Center is a nonprofit. We educate thousands of kids throughout Southern California and beyond. And yeah, STEM education is our bag. Help us.
STEM
Guys, thanks so
education is
much
our
for
future.
Facts.
That's right.
All right.
Right.
So, guys, thanks so much for being here at WonderCon. Thanks for having us. I'm going to leave you with one thing. But before I do that, remember, it's Putting the Science in Science Fiction. We're twice a month on podcasts everywhere that podcasts are: Spotify, iHeart, Apple, heavymetal.com. And just remember, Mars is the only known planet inhabited solely by robots. Thanks and good night, everyone.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.